All right, guys, so we're going to talk about Karl Marx today. Now, that name sounds very villainous, if not downright evil. His ideas have been attributed to the horrors of the 20th century, and therefore a lot of people think that we should just reject Marx and not engage with him. His ideas are vile and totally counterproductive. But if you've been led to believe that, unfortunately, that's the result of a lot of propaganda, erroneous and inflamed rhetoric surrounding his ideas. You know, in reality, Marx was a prolific thinker, one of the greatest thinkers who ever lived. His ideas have reached every part of the world, really. His ideas have influenced culture, history, literature, economics, sociology, philosophy, and many other areas as well. So when we're engaging with really anyone, any thinker, any historical event, we want to look at it in the historical context. We don't want to just latch on to this kind of propaganda and these, inflamed words that try to denounce Marx and try to make him not important to us. But he is important, and his work is worth engaging with. I mean, in fact, if you really want to understand history and the forces shaping history, as Melvin Rader once said, you can't really have a full grasp of that unless you're engaging with Marx's work. So Marx was primarily a philosopher of political economy, which is the study of production and trade in relationship to laws, customs, and human systems. His ideas helped inform and shape numerous other disciplines, such as economics, sociology, history, politics, literature, as I just mentioned. His analysis of human society helps us understand the process of history, and his theories of alienation and class struggle help us understand the obstacles humans face. So this is basically Marx's historical materialism, which is the core of his thought. In simplest terms, historical materialism is the theory that human societies develop according to how the forces of production are organized. That's historical materialism. One of the most important lessons to learn when examining historical figures or events, like I said earlier, is to understand the historical context from which they emerge. We tend to look at a lot of things from Western eyes, our contemporary limited perspective. But if we want to get a genuine understanding of a particular figure or event in history, we really need to dive into where that figure or event emerged. We have to look at the historical context always. That's absolutely paramount. So during Karl Marx's early life, he lived under the most conservative system that Europe had seen in a long time. This was referred to as the Metternich system. From 1815 to 1848, tremendous forces of change were transforming Europe. The most notable transformation being that of the Industrial Revolution. The initial phases of the Industrial Revolution were incredibly harsh, especially for those who worked in factories. It was an age of laissez-faire capitalism, which was unregulated. It was not at all uncommon for people to work 14-hour days and receive very, very poor wages. So in turn, in these urban slums, prostitution was very widespread, so was child labor. Stories emerged about children suffering severe injuries resulting in deformities from the dangerous machinery, conditions, and so forth. So whatever one may think about Marx, it seems like his reaction was absolutely understandable, if not warranted. Again, you're looking at Marx from a contemporary, limited perspective. You have to look at the historical context and see why he was actually reacting in these ways and writing the kinds of things that he was writing at the time. So it would be an exercise of prudence to avoid drawing conclusions from our contemporary, limited perspective. I really want to hammer that point home. We have to really dive deep into the historical context and the works of those we discuss if we wish to understand things meaningfully. And if we wish to see past the world of words, we cannot be subdued by rhetoric. So we live in a world of words. A lot of people say a lot of things that are not true. They're simply not true. You have to really go past those words and really investigate and analyze what it is that you are seeking. So as mentioned above, or as mentioned earlier, Marx's name is villainous to many. It may as well be a synonym for evil, especially here in America. Now, another name associated with such language is the 19th century German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Now, imagine for a moment if I encourage you to stop reading Nietzsche immediately because Hitler was fond of his work. In particular, thus spoke Zarathustra. And he even gave copies of it to his Nazi soldiers. So imagine further if I told you that Nietzsche's philosophical ideas caused the Holocaust. This would be quite bizarre considering Nietzsche would repudiate everything Hitler stood for. So taking the time to read Nietzsche's work shows that people like Hitler manipulated his philosophy for the fulfillment of immediate political purposes and interests. And the same can be said about Marx's work. So we would never read Nietzsche and say, well, you gotta stop reading Nietzsche, man. You know, his ideas caused or contributed to the Holocaust. Well, no, they didn't. They didn't. Instead, they were manipulated and they were read incorrectly. And the same could be said for Marx. Just because people call themselves Nietzscheans, Marxists, or socialists, for example, does not mean they are, in fact, these things. So, you know, if a particular totalitarian regime happens to call itself socialist, communist, a union of republics, a people's republic, or a people's democratic republic, by no means does that mean they are genuine champions of these things. The form of government very much matters. That's very important, the form of government. You could say that you're X, Y, and Z, but you're probably not X, Y, and Z. The form actually matters. So critics of socialism believe, for instance, that Venezuela is a socialist state for one simple reason. They say they are. But again, just because they say they are socialist by no means follows that they are in fact socialist. Take North Korea. They're clearly not a people's democratic republic, as they claim to be. And take the Nazi Party. They were clearly not advocates of socialism. They called themselves National Socialists. So in other words, a place like Venezuela does not espouse socialist principles, nor does North Korea promote even the most democratic principles. And for the Nazis to even claim the title socialism when they didn't even care about equal rights, they thought that persons that were contrary to the vision of the German Empire should be exterminated, torn like weeds, insignificant weeds from the ground. How can they at all be said to espouse any kind of socialist idea? So they didn't even believe in equality, so how can they be deemed socialist? And we see this all the time. He said he was a socialist, he said he was a Marxist, he said this, he said that. You know, just because you say you're something doesn't mean you actually embody that something. So the lesson here is we really need to move beyond the world of words. You should engage with Marx's work meaningfully. So like I said, even Melvin Rader said before that, you know, to really understand history and what's shaping history, understand political economy, philosophy in many ways, economics, sociology, you need to read Marx, you have to engage with him. That doesn't mean that you have to become a Marxist or a socialist or anything like that, but you need to engage with his work. Same thing with any other thinker you could think of. You know, doesn't matter how vehemently you're opposed to a particular person's thought, you still have to engage with it. That's going to inform you far better than if you're engaging with just thinkers that you think are right. So regardless of what you've heard about Marx, you need to engage with his work and get past mere words, get past the rhetoric, get past the propaganda, and read his work to better understand the world.